I'm currently in a night jet on my way to Munich, Germany to incorporate my very first company. And it's a startup company, and I will be part of it and part of the managing team. And it feels weird. I don't know any female CEOs. But before you judge me too early, let me ask you to imagine a CEO. Is it a man? Well, I decided to research the topic, and here's what I found. This is an article released by the Harvard Business Review stating the best performing CEOs in the world. It's a list of 50 CEOs, and unsurprisingly, you have people like Steve Jobs or Jeffrey Bezos on the list. And in spot number 8, we actually have one woman, Margaret C. Whitman, with eBay. And the list goes on, but there's no other woman to be found on the list. And at the end of the article, it states, women CEOs, why so few? Even Harvard Business Review acknowledges that women still aren't treated as equals to men when it comes to high-stakes positions. And in the US today, only 15 make the Fortune 500 list. Breaking news in Germany. 2 female CEOs are in the DAX 40, but that's just 5%. In a country where employed women make up almost 50% of the working force. So, it seems as though at the top levels, they're underrepresented. So why does the top look like this for women? What are the barriers and biases keeping them back? I interviewed several women to find out what in their industries was keeping them back and their personal experiences, and combine this with academic research. Through my interviews and my research, I found that the barriers and biases holding women back from these executive positions are incredibly complex, and not a simple solution can fix them. That's why I decided to analyze all the different steps in our lives that bring us to these positions. So from the culture and our upbringing, to the education we follow, to then entering the job market, whether it be in the startup world or in the corporate one, to then the connections and the networks we build up, and the positions we acquire. So let's start at the beginning, with our culture and our upbringing.
If you don't see many women CEOs, if you don't see many women CEOs, I don't know, having kids, or having 2-3 kids, or having study or not study the technical study. So it's very, very hard. So you have to break a lot of biases, or like face many challenges.
I always thought I saw men and women as equals when it came to family and career. However, I took this implicit bias test made by Harvard University, and it actually found that in a split-second decision, I associated women more strongly with family and men more strongly with career. So indeed, even I was biased.
What are the first contact points that females have, or young girls have, when it comes to role models in career options?
But if you can see it, you can be it.
Like growing up, who were your role models and why?
It's really my family in the end, to be honest. I mean, my dad founded his business when he was 18 years old, and but I think I didn't associate that so much with me because he was a man. But then also, my mom ended up founding a business with around 60 now, and she's super career driven. My sister has this really strong personality. She's really confident, and she's like kind of always like going for what she wants.
Everything started from my grandmother. She back in the 40s, 50s, something like that. So an age where women were not considered to be businesswoman. She had the ability to always be a businesswoman. She told me that this was possible, and you can do it, even if you're a woman.
Now that we've covered upbringing and culture, let's focus on education. Research has shown that women actually outnumber men in business studies, not however yet in entrepreneurship studies. And this is a problem when we look at the startup world.
I wanted to have a female co-founder, and it was not possible for me to find one. It was easier To find a male co-founder.
Decision to buy a company that was Arctic at the beginning with 2 employees and no revenue at all, and I decided to buy it, and it was a choice. I mean, or 100% good or 100% bad. It's a good risk to take. I think it's part of being an entrepreneur.
As said by Giulia, founding a company is a risk. And studies have shown that women are actually more risk averse than men. And unsurprisingly, this means that there are less female founders. But for these female founders, it's difficult to create a fully fledged business.
The majority of people who are venture capitalists or even business angels are men, and they tend to invest in companies that are driven by men, and that is what you see.
Petra is right. Only 2.3% of VC funding went to women. This means that even the little female founders that there are have it extremely difficult to create fully fledged businesses and become the CEOs of these. So let's take a look at the corporate world. As mentioned before, highly educated women enter the workforce just as much as men do. But then through the pipeline, through the corporate ladder, more and more women drop out and it becomes male dominated. So I analyzed the corporate ladder and what keeps women back at different stages. For this, we have 4 key elements: connections and networks, promotions, motherhood, and what happens at the executive level. So let's start with connections and networks.
Being female and being young, there are 2 things that together makes things really difficult sometimes.
My current context in real estate is that a lot of times in networking events, people don't even want to talk to you because they just assume, because I'm a woman, that I don't have a significant role there. And yeah, and that's a little frustrating. And of course, you know, networking, even if it's professional, there's always a personal aspect to it, right? There's always like you want to kind of connect to people on a personal level so that you can grow your professional relationship. And for me, the struggle is always that not only am I one of the only women, I'm also one of the youngest people there. So it's like, it's really hard for me as a 27-year-old to connect to like a 60-year-old man on a personal level. Like, we don't have a lot in common.
Have you experienced kind of like barriers or biases because of your gender?
I've had all the usual stuff, from sexual harassment to having my ideas ignored to being the lowest person on the totem pole despite having the most experience in a room, to having to deal with very complicated, excuse me, and to having to deal with very complicated personal relationships in and outside of the workplace. Everything from, the typical guy with his hands on your ass type of a thing to much more subtle but pervasive perspectives. So I've worked in newsrooms where there were pools on who I was sleeping with to get promoted and to be prominent.
Building and fostering personal connections and networks seems harder for women in the workplace. But what about promotions?
Women find it inspiring to hear other women talk about their successes and accomplishments. Not surprising. On the other hand, the majority of women would rather downplay their own accomplishments than talk about them.
Research has shown that women are less comfortable with self-promotion, and when they do take the spotlight, they're often criticized for it. So of course, this is something that's holding women back when it comes to promotion.
To be in a management position, it's usually between 30 and 40, right? So it's also kind of age when women get kids, if they want to have kids. So it goes also hand in hand.
I think mothers are less likely to be promoted because people assume that they're busy raising their children, but they don't make the same assumption about fathers.
Do I think that I could have had kids earlier in my life? Biologically, yes. Professionally, no.
For women to leave for maternity leave is totally acceptable, where it's for men, it's sometimes seen as like, hey, like why are you leaving for work? This is not within your rights, kind of thing. So I think both sides are winning and losing here a little. I just wish that it was regarded kind of more equally.
Interesting in Germany is, there is Elternzeit, parental leave. However, this is not something that is regulated also for men.
Women leave and then they try to come back and they get other jobs or jobs not with their qualification. And I think companies really have to change the whole mindset. So equally leaving for men and for women, because what you also see is if men leave, they also have to make a kind of commitment to their own career. So they will follow, they will not have the same career they had before.
Clearly, motherhood is something that is currently holding women back from leadership positions. But even women that don't decide to have kids have it harder to reach those executive positions and become CEO. But why is that? This article mentions key characteristics that set successful CEOs apart. The first point they mention is they make decisions earlier, faster, and with greater conviction. They do so constantly, even amid ambiguity, with incomplete information, and in unfamiliar domains. Does this sound familiar? It sounds quite like they're more risk-taking. And as studies have shown that women are less risk-taking, then this becomes a problem, because women don't fit the model. However, studies have shown that risk-averse female CEOs actually financially outperform their male counterparts. But another key element of CEO appointment is the networks that make it happen. And as mentioned previously, women sometimes have it harder here, but they're also confronted with something else.
Are biased many times, whether they're aware of it or not, toward hiring people who look like them, which is why so many executives, like I said, are not just white, are not just men, but are also white men.
Apparently, we are not able to bring more diversity to the company. So I do think that we need to force diversity in leadership levels so that then everyone can hire the same person. Because this will happen. I will probably, I will also be biased towards women.
So if we want women in these high positions, if we want women on boards, if we want women in politics, then we need to have a quota.
But the issue of quotas is a highly debated one. On the one hand, studies have shown that quotas actually lead to indeed higher female representation on leadership levels. However, it also leads to women being seen as the quota woman, as less than, and only being promoted to these executive positions because of the quota. And so, the topic of female executives and CEOs and the barriers and biases holding them back are extremely complex. From the upbringing we have, the culture that shapes us, our role models, over to female startups and CEOs, but also in the corporate world. How do women engage in the workforce? What leads them to be promoted? How do they create networks? And then what results in them being executives on the board or appointed as CEO? And so the topic remains highly debated. There's so many barriers and biases holding women back, and there's no one solution fits all.
It's the culture. I think we live in a world where for I don't know how many years women had to stay in their home and make children, and only in the past, let me say 10 years, but I think it's too much, even it's in the past 2-3 years where women are considered, they can do it, and I think it's a matter of time, that's it. Our generation is trying to change what is the view of women and the recognition of women, and it's a matter of time.
For the first time in hundreds of thousands of years, we're realizing women are we're killing it, we're really good at a lot of things, and so
we need to also believe much more in our abilities and just kind of also go for it more and be less scared.
The more we amplify those women who are already leading, who might really hate self-promotion, but they are in fact in leadership roles, the more we tell their stories, the more we create pathways into leadership for other women.
I think it's no longer acceptable that it is all run and done by men. And you see, in the meantime, now also thanks to social media, we can just react to something that is simply not right.
And I think that's the key point here. It's not about illustrating who's at fault and who's not, and what barriers and biases we may know or not know. It's just about sharing stories, sharing experiences, becoming more aware of what's holding women back in executive positions and becoming CEOs. the more we confront these barriers and biases, the more we can pave the way for other young women to become female executives and CEOs.